Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Thunderbolts open to the second worst opening in the entire history of the MCU. When you actually compare numbers, right? You adjust for inflation, you look at overall ticket sales as far as the estimates for their opening weekends. You heard me correctly. Thunderbolts has the second worst opening, losing, or rather in this case, winning only to 2023's absolute terrible flop that was The Marvels, which had obviously the worst opening, the worst, in fact, the worst entire box office run of the history of the MCU as well. And so Thunderbolts really not off to a great start, but there is some light at the end of the tunnel for Thunderbolts, and that is that the word of mouth on the film has actually been pretty positive. As someone who has seen the film myself, I did not think the film was very good. There were a lot of issues with the story, and overall, it's just very tiresome to see a lot of these characters really just being treated the way they were, especially with a lot of the guy characters being portrayed as bad dads. Just kind of this trope that Hollywood, especially Disney, has been kind of notorious for over like the last several years, most especially. It's like this trend that they have to always portray dads in a very bad way, or at least present a lot more bad dads than you're typically used to seeing. And yeah, let's just say I'm not a big fan of it, and a lot of other people as well are also not a big fan of it either. But these mixed to positive reviews that we are seeing, Criticlist, I think, is a really great foreground of this, because the fact is the movie has a current rad score over on there, right, with a 60% average rating on that platform. And yet, if you go to all of the different reviews, you've got people going from most heinous to most excellent all across the board, and people very passionate, in fact, about their views on the movie. And so Thunderbolts making $76 million. On the surface, right, based off of this opening alone, as I mentioned, historically, it is the second worst opening in the entire history of the MCU. And obviously, we're also not only comparing apples to apples as far as ticket sales and as far as, numbers just for inflation to try to make things equal, but also, too, we're looking just at these domestic numbers here, which is going to be a very important factor for Disney going forward, because even though they obviously do rely much to a certain degree on international sales, we do know that they have a lot more reliance and a much higher need for domestic sales, because they get a much larger chunk of the pie there. You get a lot more back as a studio by having your film released in the United States than you do releasing them internationally, where you get much less back return on investment. So right now, things are not looking all that great for Thunderbolts, but hey, strange things can always happen. We don't really have a good idea about what the holds on this movie are going to look like throughout the week. We don't know if this film is going to have your typical MCU drop-off, right? Typically, films drop from the MCU 65% or more in their second weekend. And so do we see a film drop off like that, or do we see it drop in the low 60s or maybe even the 50s, right? That's going to tell us quite a bit. If the film drops in the 60s or higher, that tells us, okay, this film's likely going to have your typical MCU run, which means it's going to come in probably around or maybe even a little bit underneath where Captain America Brave New World ended up, which, remember, that movie only made it to around $415 million. And that, of course, a massive flop, because we know how much money that movie really cost to make, even though, of course, the fake news out there still is like, oh, it was only $180 million. Again, we have brains, or at least most of us have brains, and we know that that number is absolutely just one that was floated out by Disney to the trades to try to make things seem a lot better at the box office. But even with that number, right, even with that lower number, we know that the budget's a lot higher than that. Even with that lower number, though, it still didn't reach that threshold. It still did not make anywhere close to what it needed to actually break even. And so if that is going to be the comparison, if that's going to be the film that we look to, okay, does this film do better down the line than that movie? Guess what? With this kind of an opening being less, not only domestically than the domestic opening for Brave New World, but also internationally as well, beneath where Brave New World ended up too, it does raise those questions of, even if it trades, or rather, even if it trends better, even if it does better down the line, will it be able to make up that deficit, and will that be made up enough to push it to the $540 or so million the film still needs to break even? And that's, again, assuming that $180 million figure that they're also throwing out for this film. It's very convenient, right? That a lot of their films, they have these like very standard, very set 180 million, 180 million, 200 million, 200 million. And as we all know, just by looking at the history of these budgets, they are almost always lying about them, and it ends up being a lot higher when everything is said and done. And so we'll talk obviously more about this, but also updates on Sinners, which has another crazy hold, right? Last weekend dropping only 5%, this weekend only dropping 28%, so there's no market adjustment here. No. This film is doing as well as it looks like. And if the Thunderbolts has the kind of drop that we are used to seeing for an MCU film, and if Sinners has yet another strong hold, again, at this point, there's very little reason to suspect that Sinners won't have a good hold next weekend, you could potentially even see Sinners in its fourth weekend beat the second weekend totals for Thunderbolts. That's kind of the territory that we are in now, not only for Sinners, but also for the comparison here with Thunderbolts. And you might even have that potential where if something like that does happen, guess what? Sinners might actually end up ending with a much higher domestic total than the Thunderbolts movie. Again, that is the territory that we're in at this point in time, and it has to, of course, be stated as such. Minecraft, also some updates here. So let's go ahead and just dive further into these numbers. So Thunderbolts, the number one spot, $76 million, $17,000 per screen. And as I mentioned before, really, really bad in comparison to the rest of the MCU. Now, I can already hear the MCU stands crying and whinging about like, oh, well, you already said this about Sinners and you were wrong about that. Well, here's the thing, okay? This is, on paper, factually speaking, the second worst opening, and I'll go ahead and show you the numbers here. So $76 million. The fact that you have, in today's world, average ticket sales being around $14 per ticket, and for a film like Thunderbolts, which is being shown primarily in IMAX, in 3D, in Dolby, which has a much higher premium price, we could actually assume that number of tickets sold is probably even less than what that currently than what that's being stated as, right? It's probably actually a lot higher ticket price, and so therefore ticket sales are probably even lower than that. But let's just try to be as fair as we possibly can. And so 5.4 million tickets, that's a lot less than almost by a million tickets that Captain America Brave New World had in its opening weekend, which only opened to 88 million. This was also one of the worst openings, right? At that time, it was around the second or third worst opening in the history of the MCU, and of course it did not leg out to do that much better down the road, but Thunderbolts right now very clearly in that number 2 spot, because again, the Marvels, okay, clearly did a lot worse. Not much is gonna do worse than the Marvels, right? That film was abysmally bad. But even other films that you think, oh, what's the comparison like with other films, maybe even from 2021? Here's some fun facts here, right? So first off, Eternals from 2021, that film actually, when you adjust it, $82 million is what that film would have made, right, in today's market, which equates to around 6.8 million tickets. So whether you like inflation, hate it, like it being mentioned, hate it being mentioned, the fact still remains, whether you're looking at the ticket sales or not, guess what? Thunderbolts still did worse than that. Even in 2021, even during the COVID years. Remember Black Widow had a day-and-date release on Disney+, which they blamed as far as why the film didn't do as well. That still had 7.7 million tickets, $93 million when you adjust for inflation. Some of these other ones, $92 million for Ant-Man and the Wasp 2018, 8.3 million tickets, 74 million for Ant-Man 2015. This is the one film where actually you could say, based on the current numbers, obviously, if the numbers trend downward when we get the actuals on Monday or Tuesday for Thunderbolts, that will tell us a little bit more here. But even though, right now, $76 million today, right, versus the $74 million adjusted numbers of Ant-Man from 2015 is obviously showing the edge for Thunderbolts, that's still equated to 6.7 million tickets. 6.7 million is higher than 5.4 million. So even though, on paper, even when you adjust for inflation, Thunderbolts is supposedly now making more in its opening weekend, it didn't have as many people. And that's a big problem here, right? Because of inflation, because of just the state of the MCU, they have been losing and bleeding their audiences. They don't have that guaranteed audience like they once had to the same degree that they once had, right? We go ahead and look and compare a lot of these numbers here. I mean, when the first Avengers film came out, 26 million people saw that first film. Iron Man 3, 21 million. Dropped off quite a bit with Thor the Dark World, but also that's one that's often seen and said to be one of the worst films in the MCU. So that has to be brought up. The other film that we can actually compare more directly the Thunderbolts numbers to is Incredible Hulk. When you adjust that number, this is a fun number right here. When you adjust that number for inflation, guess what? Incredible Hulk, which most people admit back in 2008 was actually a flop, was a domestic and just a box office flop, still had a $79 million opening weekend when you adjust for inflation, with 7.7 million tickets. So as you can see, no matter what the film is, as far as ticket sales are concerned, yeah, Thunderbolts, less tickets than any other film that's ever been released in the MCU in its opening weekend, except for the Marvels 2023. Ergo, second worst opening in MCU history. And again, looking here just at the domestic numbers. These are really, really bad numbers. This is not what they want to see. Now, of course, mainstream media is going to run with the story that this is actually really, really good, right? Thunderbolts rolls to. That's a positive phrasing there. 162 million global opening. Minecraft nearing $900 million worldwide. Its film is slowing down quite a bit. Again, do I think $1 billion is on the table? I do. I just think that there's enough love that they might will this thing to that point, but it's slowing down enough to where it's definitely not as much of a guarantee as it was just a few weeks ago. And Sinners, again, another amazing hold, and even though they're going to try to play the joke with Saintly, it's just an insane hold, even in the third weekend of release. It goes in and said, coming in a touch lower than where we were heading or saw it heading yesterday. That's right. Even with the good word of mouth, it's trending lower than expectations. So this is the reason why, as of right now, there is not a lot of indication that word of mouth is going to really work all that well for this movie. Again, that week 2 number will be very key to seeing exactly where people stand on this. But if we see your typical MCU fare, even that Sunday to Monday drop-off, right? If it's in the same vein as a lot of the MCU films recently, if it's in the same vein, especially of a Captain America Brave New World, if we see the week 2 numbers come in very similarly too, guess what? Thunderbolts will not have a prayer of making its money back or get anywhere close to it. But again, media is going to do what the media does. It says right here, the worldwide bow is within the pre-weekend projected opening range. Again, trying to paint that rosy picture. Overseas, the Florence Pugh Star launched at number 1 or number 1 non-local in nearly all major markets, as well as most smaller markets. The international debut is estimated to be 45% ahead of Shang-Chi. Remember when that film came out? 13% above Ant-Man, even though, again, more tickets were sold to Ant-Man than there were for this movie, and 7% over Guardians of the Galaxy in like-for-like markets at current rates, excluding China. Now, again, that's using the modern rates, not of inflation, but the current exchange rates. So they're not actually comparing like-for-like as far as the actual dollar amount value. So even though they're going to say these things that make it seem a lot better than it actually is, they are leaving a huge part out of it, which is, again, the value of the dollar has changed quite a bit since Shang-Chi has come out, especially since Ant-Man has come out. And, of course, since Guardians of the Galaxy has come out as well, right? Even though this film is above those releases, as you saw from the ticket sales alone, right? Even if you hate inflation, even if you hate that thing, whole concept being mentioned, ticket sales are much more clear on that too. And ticket sales don't lie, son. Anyway, let's go to the worldwide totals here for Thunderbolts. $162 million. Again, just not the best of openings. This is about $20 million or so behind where Brave New World opened up. So it's tracking behind that movie. And even though I do think this film has been much more well received than Captain America Brave New World was, based on the numbers that we're seeing, based on the fact that it's still not tracking better than expectations, right? Coming in beneath even Nancy, good old Nance, and her coverage over on Deadline, it's telling me that those holds are not really looking all that good. But again, it's still too early to tell. Opening weekend's going to be affected by a lot of different things. We'll see what the weekdays look like and what next weekend looks like. But as of right now, not a good start for this film. Sinners, on the other hand, is a film that, again, did not have the best start in the world. It did better than expected, and it obviously got a lot of people talking about this fact. But hey, the budget is still what it is, right? Between $90 and $100 million, right? That's the range of the reports that we have had. But the second weekend was insane. 5% drop. That changed the whole story, the whole narrative. The whole story, once again, is being updated because it's only dropped around 28% or so in the second weekend. So again, insane numbers here. Minecraft holding 40%. Accountant, on the other hand, dropping 61%. This film right now likely to be a flop because of that. And again, more comments on that in a little bit. And then Until Dawn holding actually 53%, so pretty good. But Sinners, $236 million. It's on the cusp of getting to $200 million domestic. It'll do that easily by the end of next weekend. But also, too, because of that budget, the film has not yet broken even, right? There are some people out there who are going to try and say, of course it's broken even. Again, even at $90 million, right, the film still has just a little bit more that it needs to make. It's going to hit that point by the end of next weekend, okay? It's going to get to that point, no doubt about it. But the fact is that it still reminds us that that budget is going to hold the film back from making as much profits as it really should be. This film should be making a lot more in profits than it's going to be making. It's still tracking towards around maybe $50 million or more in net gain profits, right? That's after you take into account how much they spent on the film, on the marketing for the film, etc., after the cuts you take from theaters. Between the theaters and the studios, right? All those things. And it's still looking around at $50 million or more in net profits. Again, that's good. But when you're putting $90 million or more into your project, you don't just want to make your money back. You don't just want to make $50 million in profit. You want to make a lot more than that. And again, VOD is going to be huge for this film. Okay, so it's going to make a lot of profits there. But there was about $50 million left on the table because of the budget of this film. They could have easily have made a film like this for a lot less than they spent it on, and that could have meant even more in net profits. So again, people who complain anytime I try to point that out, again, I just look at the numbers as they are, and this film is doing really well. This film is a huge success, but this film could have been even bigger had they been much smarter with their money. Minecraft, $873 million. Again, slow down quite a bit. I thought it'd be around $900 million at this point. That has not happened, so it's definitely slowing down. Accountant 2. So again, $54 million after 2 weeks. This is not a good number, right? $80 million was the budget on this film. So this film still has a long way to go. And based on the current tracking and projections, this film right now, we're going to say, is likely to be a box office flop. Now, the point I wanted to make about this is just this very fact. The film opened, right, to again, not that great of an opening number, right? Maybe better than what the projections were estimating to a certain extent. But the word of mouth on this film was really good. Every person that I heard mention or talk about this and all the reviews, right, really pointed to people really really enjoying this movie. And yet good word of mouth clearly did not save the film. It dropped over 60%. This goes back to why I said Sinners was not guaranteed to do anything, because even though the word of mouth was indeed very good on that movie, so is it on this movie. Clearly, though, just because you have good word of mouth does not impact your overall numbers, okay? Because twice the audience showed up to Sinners in their opening weekend than Accountant did. So that obviously impacts the amount of people who are experiencing the film, the amount of people who are experiencing it and liking it and promoting it to their friends. And that ultimately cuts into your numbers down the line. Sinners is in a category of its own. And it just goes to show you, Accountant 2 is following where most films, even with the kinds of opening weekends that it got, even with positive word of mouth, where most films end up going, which is unfortunately down the drain. And when you have a very, very high budget, that's what we mean by all of this, right? It's only because the film cost $80 million in this case to make that the film is likely to lose money. It's the reason why Sinners, when it first came out, yes, came in above expectations, positive word of mouth. But that $90 million budget meant that, okay, that was not the kind of opening weekend you needed to make with a $90 million budget. Unless, of course, you have the kind of run that Sinners has had, which is 1 in a million, right? It just does not happen on a regular basis. Accountant 2, I think, is a great example showing exactly why, me and many other box office persons and personalities here on YouTube, right, when we saw those opening numbers and said, okay, word of mouth is really good on this thing, the opening weekend's a lot better, but it was not enough. Week 2, whole game changed because films don't drop only 5% in their second weekend. And especially after that kind of a drop, they don't drop only 28% in their third weekend. So huge, huge win once again for Sinners. Can't say that enough, but Accountant 2, not the same case at all. Until Dawn is indeed strong enough at this point to be on the way to profit. Hasn't made profit back yet, but it will be doing so very, very soon. So let's go ahead and dive into the charts because we love charts here on OMB Reviews. And let's start off with Thunderbolts. So Thunderbolts has made only $162 million in its opening weekend, and people might say, only $163 million? I mean, this is one of the biggest movies of the year. That's the problem. That's the mindset people need to break themselves out of. Just because a film has the highest opening of a year so far, right? We're in May. We still have several films coming out yet. And that's not where this movie is, right? Minecraft is obviously one of the films that we talk about there. But when people mention things like, oh, biggest opening weekend in this time, or, oh, compared to everything that's come out recently, the film's opening weekend is huge, right? All of those things might actually be true, but doesn't really mean anything. If you're not taking the numbers in context to how much is spent and how much you get back on your returns, you're only getting part of the picture. And people are going to want to pick and choose what numbers they look at. And that's why I have charts like this, because you see every single number. It keeps everybody honest here. It keeps everybody focused on exactly what is going on. Because yes, this is a huge opening weekend. When you compare this thing to Until Dawn, it's huge. Compared to The Accountant 2, it's huge. Compared even to Sinners, it is also huge. Compared to the Minecraft movie, not even close. $313 million. Compare this to Captain America Brave New World. Ooh, okay. Almost 20 million or so less than what Captain America Brave New World. And we know this film only ended up making around $415 million by the end of its run, which is just barely above what the minimum projection on that film actually was, right? The minimum projection on that film after 2 weeks was $413 million, making around 415 is, again, just barely over that minimum amount. So we're going to have to see a very strong hold week 2 to have any hopes or any prospects, or Disney and MCU are going to have any hopes or prospects from them would be, again, they would have to have a very strong hold in week 2. Could it happen? Sure. The word of mouth seems to be there, but it seems also to be very, very divisive. It seems to be very, very divided on that point. And typically when you have a divided audience, you usually don't see success. This is where Sinners changes, right? Because Sinners, overwhelmingly, the audience has loved it. Right? Even over on Critic List, you go to that site and you see the vast majority of reviews there are positive. Not all of them have most excellent scores, but almost all of them, or the vast majority of them at least, are at least in that positive range. You obviously do have those that say it's decent or even say it's a terrible film, but overwhelmingly, there is a very clear message, right, that people are enjoying it. You don't have that same clear messaging with Thunderbolts, and that's why I think right now Thunderbolts is in not a great position at all going forward. And so that's why, again, the fact that it costs $80 million, again, according to them, $180 million, that still means that today's market, 3 times your budget is what most films need to break even these days. $540 million based on this opening is not likely to happen. And again, remember, most films tend to make about a third of their entire box office in their opening weekend. And some people might say, oh, okay, so what would then that mean for a film like this, right? So let me go ahead and just do that live because, again, we do things live here on OMB Reviews. It helps keep me honest. So 162, if this ends up being a third of its opening, that would actually mean $486 million. But that's still not $540 million. That's still well below your break-even point. And remember, when it comes to MCU films especially, their opening weekends are very front-loaded, meaning you have a much larger portion of your audience in your opening weekend, which is why you have massive drops in week 2, week 3, and so on and so forth, when less and less people are going to see the film. The opening weekend is so crucial for most of the MCU films, especially in the modern day, for making any money or making any dent. Is that the same story going to be for Thunderbolts, or are we going to see a strong hold? Again, that's why the week 2 number is going to determine, do we see 486, do we see 550, or do we only see 400? Again, too early to tell at this point, but not looking all that great. Some updates here for Until Dawn. $34.7 million after 2 weeks means we project now at this point the film will make between $49 and $69 million by the end of its run. Since the film had a very, very modest $15 million budget, we're projecting the film to make somewhere between $7 and $19 million. And again, that's based off a 2.5 multiplier, so we're probably looking at around between $5 and $15 million. And so just as in the case with Sinners, right, when you're spending $15 million and you're making maybe $5 to $10 million back in profit, again, it's good in that you are making your money back, you're making some profit, but you definitely want to make more on that in the long run, right? If you are making back how much you spent on it, that's a good thing. But you want to be able to make enough back so that you can justify making more films into the future, right? So that's why films that are able to pay for itself and pay for the second, third, fourth movie down the line, right? Super Mario Brothers is a great example of that. That's where a lot of films want to be, even the ones with smaller budgets. So this is in a better position only because it costs so much less, and obviously the film could do even better than even these projections currently have. But again, based off of that, Until Dawn, likely going to be making some profit. As of right now, it's around $6 million in the red. So it's going to very easily be able to make that amount back when everything is said and done. And so we'll probably see that make its money back by the end of next weekend, if I had to guess. Same story cannot be said for The Accountant, right? With the week 2 numbers on The Accountant at $54 million worldwide. We're projecting the film to make somewhere between $77 and $108 million globally. With an $80 million budget, yeah, that means the film's going to lose around $75 million. Again, when you take into account the 3 times multiplier, we're talking about $75 million right now currently in projected losses for the film. As of right now, it's $92 million in the red, so it's not looking like it's going to make that much more money, and $75 million is quite a bit to make up. Now, could it make some money back with VOD, with future prospects, with other revenue streams? Absolutely, right? That can obviously happen. But as far as an individual release at the box office, this is not where you want to be. You'd much rather be in the shoes of Sinners, right? Right now, people were saying, oh, it's going to break even this weekend. Again, based off the budget, $20 million in the red. Now, some are saying, oh, that's because you still have the budget at $95 million, and most people are saying it is $90 million. Okay, well, let's go ahead. Let's just keep me honest here. $90 million, and let's see. Based off of that, even when you adjust the numbers, guess what? It's still $13 million in the red. So again, the film is going to break even. It's going to very easily do so sometime this week. So whereas most films sometimes need to get to their second weekend, or sorry, in this, when they're this close, need to get to their next weekend in order to make their money back. Because this film is tracking so well and doing well even during the weekdays, this film will likely hit its break-even point even before next weekend. If it doesn't, it's going to be able to do so very, very easily next weekend, or at least by the end of next weekend. And $300 million or more is on the table for this movie, no doubt about it. So again, a very big change from its opening weekend. Opening weekend prospects did not look that great. Again, good opening weekend based off of what was expected to be made, but that budget was really holding it back. At this point, though, because of insane historical drops, 5% second weekend, 28% third weekend, this film is tracking like no other we have ever seen. And this is, or at least not seen in modern memory, or at least that I can remember, all the years that I've been tracking the box office. So yeah, Sinners, great position to make some money back. Question is really, how much money does it make back? Does it make $50 million in net profit? Does it make $100 million in net profit? Based off of where it's currently tracking, $50 million seems more likely, but hey, anything can happen. Now, some of these numbers have not been fully updated yet because the numbers is lagging behind a little bit, and Box Office Mojo always lags behind. But as of last update, drop was only $2 million in the red. So that film, again, on the cusp of breaking even. Warfare, again, A24 release, doing better, or rather, doing a typical A24 release in general, but $16 million in the red. So that's still not where you want to be. King of Kings made some money. Minecraft, still $180 million in profit. So we're talking easily going to make well over $200 million in profit. That's where you want to be, right? When you are spending, let's see the budget on this film again. So $150 million. So that's actually, you're making your money back. You're making the budget for the next movie. So it's not exactly the perfect scenario yet. I think it will get pretty close to it though, right? Well, your perfect scenario is you make your money back and enough to pay for the next budget and the marketing for it. It's going to likely get to that point, but yeah, this film doing very, very well. Working Man, still a box office loss, but I think this film probably made its money back on VOD, right? When you have that much of that small of a loss, you can make your money back VOD pretty easily. Death of Unicorn, probably in a similar boat there. Woman in the Yard, probably also in a similar boat there as well. But anyway, those are the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts? Did you see Thunderbolts? Where do you stand on it? Again, some people love it, some people hate it. Numbers don't lie, though. And right now, the numbers are not looking all that great for it, especially if we got any information that the budget was a lot more than $180 million. And again, there's no reason for us not to think that is the case because, again, Marvel consistently lies about their numbers. I can't tell you how many times they said, oh yeah, this film cost $200 million, or this film cost $180 million, and then it ended up costing $300 million. Again, this is just the standard rate of what happens, right? If you just go back to my MCU chart here, right? Some of the numbers, some of the reminders, right? When you had Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness come out, right? What was the thing? They said, oh, it cost between $200 and $250 million. Oh, it turns out net spend was $392 million. Right now, again, that's adjusted for inflation. It was actually $350 million in net spend, but that's a lot more than $200 to $250 million in the initial estimates. You know, we didn't get that exact same thing for Thor: Love and Thunder. We didn't get the full results there, but again, if they spent that much more on Doctor Strange, I imagine it was more there too. The most notorious one is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, right? That film was projected to have cost $200 million or less, ended up costing $330 million. So in today's dollars, that's 353. So again, this is that example that they are known. They are notorious for lying, which is why Captain America: Brave New World likely did cost $350 million or more compared to everything else, especially with the reporting coming out that was actually the case. So anyway, let me know your thoughts about that. Also, anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you also smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Sunday, still in the blessed season of Easter. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. Also a huge shout out to my newest YouTube member, Raichu. And lastly, to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day.